You're listening to a production of the National Media Archive. To learn more or volunteer, go to nationalmediaarchive.com.
Let me set the stage. Imagine a sun-drenched stretch of land just south of San Francisco home to companies that have changed the world. Google, Apple, YouTube, Uber all started right here. But here's a question. Is Silicon Valley just an engine of progress? Or is there a darker side beneath the glossy tech exterior? Now, you might be picturing gleaming campuses, free food, and Teslas everywhere, and you'd be right to a point. But look closer, and you'll see a region grappling with issues that rival its innovations. Today, we'll peel back the layers on how this global tech epicenter became both a beacon of opportunity and, for many, a dystopian maze of high costs and social divides. I'll walk you through Silicon Valley's roots, the meteoric rise, the growing pains, and the consequences intended and not that have shaped life here. Ready to dive in? Let's begin with how this place became the world's innovation hotspot and why that very success now fuels its toughest challenges. Think of Silicon Valley's origin story like a chemistry experiment, a potent mix of vision, risk, and relentless energy. The 1970s and 80s saw tinkerers in garages, think Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak launching what would become Apple, right in a cramped, barely lit workspace. Fast forward, and those scrappy beginnings gave rise to an ecosystem. Stanford's research labs, access to venture capital, and a culture that encouraged moonshot ideas. But why here? Two technical terms come to mind. Network effects, the phenomenon where success begets success, attracting more talent and capital and agglomeration, which is a fancy way of saying businesses cluster together and feed off each other's momentum. Now, you might be thinking, couldn't this have happened in New York or Boston? In theory, yes. But nowhere else had this specific blend of risk tolerance, talent, and crucially, land ready for sprawling campuses. Silicon Valley's DNA was set. Innovation at all costs, and a belief that changing the world starts with a wild idea and a little bit of luck. What is it about Silicon Valley that draws people from every corner of the globe? The answer is simple: opportunity. In fact, about 35% of residents were born outside the U.S. That's diversity in action. Let me tell you a story. I once met Fernando, an engineer from Costa Rica, who landed a $250 a year job at Google, something unimaginable back home. That's the promise of the Valley. But here's where two critical terms arise. Human capital, the skills and knowledge people bring in social mobility, or the ability to climb the economic ladder. Silicon Valley turbocharges both. Now, you might wonder, doesn't this sound like a dream? For many, yes. But for every Fernando, there's someone shut out because of skyrocketing living costs and fierce competition. The magnetic pull remains, but it's not evenly distributed. If you're in tech, doors open. If you're not, the Valley can feel like a fortress. Let's talk numbers. Imagine paying $80 a month for a modest apartment, or being told $110 a year is low income. Sounds unreal, right? Welcome to Silicon Valley's housing market. Two key concepts at play. Housing scarcity, not enough homes for the people who want demand, cost, push inflation, where prices rise due to increased demand and limited supply. Now, you might be thinking, surely high salaries offset the costs? Not always. Service workers, teachers, even some tech employees are priced out and forced to live hours away. Let me share a hypothetical. Imagine working 12-hour days, splitting rent with your partner, and still barely scraping by. That's not a rare case. It's the daily reality for many. The cost of paradise is steep, and it's reshaping who gets to live and thrive here. If you fly over Silicon Valley, you'll see endless stretches of single-family homes, not skyscrapers. Why? It boils down to two terms. Zoning laws rules dictating what can be built, wherein NIMBYism, which stands for not in my backyard, a mindset opposing new developments. Back in the 70s and 80s, activists pushed for strict regulations to preserve sunlight, parks, and historic neighborhoods. Noble, right? But the unintended result, a chronic housing shortage. Now you might wonder, why not just build up? Here's the conflict: hate limits and community opposition make it nearly impossible to add density where it's needed most. The setup: protect neighborhood character. The conflict: soaring prices and gridlock. The resolution: so far, there isn't one. The Valley's own success: more people, more jobs expose the cracks in its suburban dream. It's a classic case of policy backfiring, turning good intentions into a costly trap. Here's a twist. As cities struggle to house workers, tech giants are stepping in. Apple, Facebook, Google, they're building entire developments just for employees. Welcome to the company town too. In economic terms, this is vertical integration companies controlling not just the work environment, but where staff live, shop, and even relax. It's efficient, but is it equitable? Now, you might be thinking, doesn't this solve the housing crisis? Not quite. Most new homes are reserved for tech workers, while the broader community still struggles. The setup is clear. Tech needs talent nearby. The conflict, these enclaves risk deepening divides between the tech elite and everyone else. Resolution? Until these projects open doors to all, they're more Band-Aid than cure, leaving the region's fundamental housing shortage untouched. Let's take a ride. Imagine spending over 90 minutes each way to reach your job. That's the life of a supercommuter, a term for those whose daily trek exceeds an hour and a half. Public transportation here is a patchwork, not a network. 27 separate agencies, each with its own rules and routes. That's institutional fragmentation when service providers don't coordinate, making life harder for everyone. Now, maybe you're asking, isn't this the land of innovation? Where's the seamless transit? That's the irony. Silicon Valley's suburban sprawl resists unified solutions. The conflict is daily gridlock, lost hours, and stress. The resolution? For now, it's mostly individuals adapting, driving farther, paying more, or simply leaving. It's a hidden cost of the tech boom, a region built for cars, not connected communities. Here's a reality check. Alongside Teslas and glass towers, you'll find RVs lined up on Silicon Valley streets. Some belong to tech workers saving on rent, others to families with nowhere else to go. This is housing insecurity, the risk of losing stable shelter, and deinstitutionalization, a policy from the 70s and 80s that shuttered mental health facilities, swelling the unhoused population. You might ask, how can the richest place on earth have so many people without homes? It's a paradox born of sky-high rents, limited support systems, and decades of policy failures. The conflict is raw. Families squeezed into vans, tech pros choosing wheels over walls, and some simply left on the streets. Resolution? For many, there isn't one, just a daily struggle to find dignity in a region awash in wealth. Let's talk about the side effects of relentless ambition. In Silicon Valley, 16% of professionals see a psychologist or mental health expert, much higher than the national average. Terms to know: burnout syndrome, the exhaustion from chronic workplace stress, and hustle culture, the belief that constant work equals value. Now, you might be thinking, isn't this the price of greatness? But let me propose another question. At what point does the pursuit of innovation undermine well-being? The setup is a culture that rewards nonstop work. The conflict? Rising rates of anxiety, depression, and even clinical burnout. Resolution is elusive. Until the Valley rethinks its definition of success, the toll on mental health will remain an unsolved equation. Let me ask you, can a city be both a future and a fortress? In places like San Francisco's Mission District, old communities and new techies collide daily. Here's where gentrification, the process of wealthier newcomers displacing longtime residents, meets cultural alienation, where people feel out of place in their own neighborhoods. You might hear, "You're from tech, you're not one of us." Or the opposite, "You're Latino, you belong here." These tensions are real and raw. The setup: a city that prides itself on progress. The conflict: rising resentment, lost connections, and a sense that the soul of the community is being traded for stock options. Resolution? It starts with empathy and recognizing that true innovation means building bridges, not just apps. So, after all this, I have to ask, is Silicon Valley's story a blueprint for progress or a cautionary tale? Its achievements are undeniable, but so are its divides. Terms like structural inequality, deep-rooted gaps in opportunity and urban resilience, or a city's ability to adapt, are essential to any solution. Now, you might be wondering, can anything change? History says yes if the brightest minds look up from their MacBooks and tackle the challenges outside their front doors. Let me leave you with this. Progress isn't just about new gadgets or billion-dollar valuations. It's about lifting everyone, not just the lucky few. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Silicon Valley. Next time you swipe click, or stream, remember the real people and real issues behind the digital curtain.